In March of 1840, San Antonio became the stage for one of the bloodiest and infamous diplomatic meetings in American frontier history. A delegation of Comanche chiefs, warriors, women, and children arrived under a white flag of truce, believing they were walking into a peace council with officials of the Republic of Texas. The building they entered was the Old Council House, known as the Casa Realis, and within its stone walls, the seeds of disaster had already been planted. Texan officials had prepared an ultimatum. They demanded that the Comanche hand over every single captive they had taken during raids. Until those captives were returned, the chiefs who had come to San Antonio would not be allowed to leave. For the Texans, this seemed like a straightforward and just demand. For the Comanches, on the other hand, this seemed like an impossible task. This reflected the complete misunderstanding of how their political systems worked. The confrontation that followed turned what was supposed to be a peace parley into a massacre. Guns and arrows clashed in the cramped room, leaving dozens of Comanche chiefs, warriors, women, and children on the floor. What should have been the beginning of a diplomatic solution instead became the collapse of trust and the escalation of violence. This was known as the Council House Fight, and it has been studied and debated by historians for decades. It's discussed in the Handbook of Texas and analyzed in works such as S.E. Gwynne's Empire of the Summer Moon, which places it within the broader arc of the Comanche's rise and fall. In many ways, the event is a tragic microcosm of the broader conflict between Euro-American settlers and the Plains tribes. An encounter where cultural misunderstandings, rigid demands, and uncompromising ultimatums made bloodshed almost inevitable. The Council House fight also foreshadowed how the United States itself would later handle native diplomacy. What played out in San Antonio in 1840 would echo in later massacres, broken treaties, and forced removals. To understand its importance, we need to look at not only what happened on that day, but also at the tensions leading up to it, the violent outcome, and the consequences it had for both Texas and the future United States. The Republic of Texas was still very small by the time the events of 1840 unfolded. Having won independence from Mexico in 1836, the new nation faced constant instability. Its economy was fragile, its military stretched thin, and its borders vulnerable. On its western and northern frontiers, the greatest threat came not from Mexico but from the Comanche, the dominant power of the southern plains. You need to understand one thing. The Comanche in this period were at the height of their power. Renowned horsemen and fierce warriors. They controlled a territory often referred to as Comancheria, stretching from present-day Kansas deep into northern Mexico. Their raids penetrated far into Texan settlements, where they stole livestock, burned homesteads, and took captives. And these captives were very useful to them. Some were ransomed back to their families, others were adopted into Comanche society, and some were enslaved or abused. What made the Comanche so fearsome was not just their mobility on horseback, but their skill in battle. As S.E. Gwynne notes in Empire of the Summer Moon, Comanche warriors could fire arrows with astonishing speed and accuracy, often losing 6 arrows in the time it took a Texas Ranger to reload a single-shot firearm. Their composite bows, made of wood, sinew, and horn, were short enough to use on horseback yet powerful enough to punch through armor or shields. In the open plains, they routinely outshot and outfought their Texan counterparts, making them the undisputed masters of mounted warfare in North America. For Texans living on the frontier, the threat of Comanche raids were constant. Families lived in fear of losing children to kidnappers, and the stories of captive abuse, whether exaggerated or not, spread rapidly through settlements. Such accounts fueled anger and led to retaliatory raids, where Texan forces often attacked Comanche camps, killing indiscriminately and sometimes taking their own prisoners. The result was a vicious cycle of violence that neither side could escape. They proposed holding peace talks in San Antonio, hoping that diplomacy might succeed where warfare had failed. The terms were simple. The Comanche were to bring all captives with them as a condition of peace. Officials believed this would prove the sincerity of the chiefs and pave way for a lasting settlement. What the Texans failed to recognize was the decentralized structure of the Comanche politics. Unlike a European-style government with a single leader, the Comanche were divided into semi-independent bands. No one chief could compel another band to give up captives. When a group of 12 chiefs agreed to travel to San Antonio in 1840, they brought with them only a single captive, believing that would be enough to begin negotiations. That miscalculation would prove to be fatal.
He says, "You say we must bring all the captives now. We have returned the only one we had. The others are held by bands beyond our reach."
Tell him that is not acceptable. You promised to bring them. You have failed your part.
He says, "We have acted in good faith. To demand what we cannot deliver, this is unfair. No chief can speak for every band."
I don't like that answer. You are under arrest. Until the captives are returned, you may not leave these premises.
You violate sacred rules of council. We came under a flag of truce. To arrest us here is betrayal.
You knew the terms. Guards, seal the doors! Let no one enter or exit until we see all prisoners returned.
The first shots rang inside the council house. Confined in the small space, chiefs and Texan soldiers clashed violently. Pistols fired at close range, arrows flew, and knives flashed in the chaos. Several chiefs fought to the death rather than allow themselves to be taken prisoner. In moments, the room was filled with smoke and screams. Outside, the chaos spread into San Antonio's streets. Comanche warriors attempted to break in and rescue their leaders. However, Texan militia opened fire on them. Women and children who had accompanied the chiefs were caught in the violence. Some taken out outright, others captured in the violence. Townsfolk fled the plaza as the gunfire and shouting echoed through the city. By the time the fighting ended, around 35 Comanche were dead, including chiefs, warriors, and several women and children. 27 others were captured. 7 Texans were taken out and about 10 wounded, some by friendly fire in the confusion. The ground around the council house was littered with bodies. Reports, such as Colonel Hugh McLeod's official account, confirmed that Texan soldiers had been ordered to seize the chiefs if captives were not returned. In his own words,
"They were told they were not prisoners."
what began as a parley had turned into an ambush sanctioned at the highest levels of Texan government. For the Texans, the event was framed as a victory, a demonstration of strength in the face of Comanche aggression. But for the Comanches, it was a betrayal that demanded vengeance. In their eyes, their chiefs had been murdered while under the protection of a truce, a crime that could not go unanswered. The council house fight did not end the conflict, it intensified it. The Comanche response was swift and devastating. Outraged by what they saw as a massacre of their chiefs under a flag of peace, Comanche bands vowed revenge. In the summer of 1840, under leaders such as Buffalo Hump, they launched what became known as the Great Raid of 1840, the largest coordinated attack ever mounted by Native Americans on Texan settlements. The raid targeted the towns of Victoria and Linville. In Victoria, the attack was sudden and brutal, leaving residents dead and property destroyed. In Linville, the raiders burned much of the town and captured vast amounts of goods. Some estimates suggest that the Comanche carried off merchandise worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's terms. The raid was both a demonstration of Comanche power and an act of vengeance for the betrayal on San Antonio. The council house fight had been meant to force peace through intimidation, but instead it had triggered an escalation of violence on a scale they had not anticipated. The cycle of raids became even more entrenched. Militia forces pursued the Comanche, leading to battles such as the Battle of Plum Creek, but the damage had already been done. The Great Raid cemented the Comanche reputation as a formidable military power, even as it also intensified Texan determination to subdue them. Neither side trusted the other. For the Comanche, peace talks would always carry the shadow of betrayal. For the Texans, Comanche promises were dismissed as deception. This mutual distrust ensured that violence, not negotiation, would define the relationship going forward. The council house fight had destroyed any chance of peaceful coexistence, ensuring decades of warfare that would only end when the United States itself turned its full military might against the Comanche. When Texas was annexed into the United States in 1845, it brought with it not just land, but also the legacy of the council house fight. American policymakers and military leaders studied the Texan experience and drew their own conclusions. For many, the massacre confirmed what they had already believed, that native diplomacy was futile, and only force could secure peace. This mindset soon became entrenched in US policy. Throughout the mid-19th century, peace councils with native nations were often laced with threats, ultimatums, and bad faith. Treaties were signed, broken, and rewritten, usually to the disadvantage of native peoples. When negotiations failed, military campaigns followed. In this sense, the council house fight was a grim preview of what would happen elsewhere on the frontier. The Comanche themselves remained a formidable force for several more decades, but the tide began to turn in the 1850s and 1860s. And by the way, I know my light turned off. The destruction of the buffalo herds, relentless US Army campaigns, and the pressure of encroaching settlers slowly eroded their power. By the 1870s, after battles such as Red River War, the Comanche were forced on the reservations. S.C. Gwynne's Empire of the Summer Moon places a council house fight within this broader narrative. He notes that the event not only provoked immediate retaliation, but also marked a turning point in how Texans and later Americans viewed native diplomacy. Gwynne emphasizes that leaders like Buffalo Hump and later Quanah Parker carried the memory of the council house into their struggles, reshaping the Comanche's resistance and eventual surrender. The legacy of the council house fight therefore extends far beyond Texas. It was an early signal of how the United States would manage its westward expansion. The principles established in San Antonio in 1840 would echo in places like Sand Creek in 1864 and Wounded Knee in 1890, moments where diplomacy collapsed into massacre. The Council House fight remains controversial because it embodies the clash of two incompatible worldviews. To Texan officials, the demand for captives was a matter of justice, a necessary precaution for peace. They believed the chiefs had lied when they produced only one captive, and they felt justified in detaining them until the others were returned. Like I said, to the Comanche, this was a fundamental misunderstanding. Chiefs could not return captives held by other bands, and to treat peace delegates as prisoners was an unforgivable betrayal. Historians continue to debate whether the massacre was inevitable. Some argue that Texans were driven by desperation and a desire to protect their settlers from further raids, making harsh measures unavoidable. Others see it as a tragic blunder born of arrogance and ignorance. By demanding what the Comanche could not deliver, Texan officials guaranteed conflict rather than preventing it. Modern scholars often frame the event as a case study in cultural misunderstanding. The Texans applied European legal concepts of authority and responsibility to a decentralized society where no one person held absolute power. The result was a breakdown in communication that turned negotiation into violence. For the Comanches, the Council House fight confirmed that Texans could not be trusted. Oral traditions and tribal memory recall it as a betrayal that justified vengeance. From the Texan perspective, the Great Raid that came after confirmed their belief that the Comanches were irredeemably hostile. Each side had their own take on the events. In the end, the Council House fight is more than just a skirmish. It's a symbol of the broader failure of diplomacy between Native Americans and the expanding United States. It forces us to ask difficult questions. Could peace have ever been possible? Or was the conflict doomed by cultural arrogance and incompatible worldviews? Anyways guys, I urge you to go look up the Council House fight yourself and see what you think. It's a very interesting story in United States history. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Drop a like down below and subscribe for more content. And as always guys, stay curious.